Welcome to another episode of TransParents. I am one of the co-hosts of this show, Amber. My pronouns are she, her. You can find me on TikTok at Moonchild77. I'm going to let my co-host introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Jenny. My pronouns are also she, her. You can find me at Transloving Mama on TikTok.
And then we have our special guest tonight. I'm going to let her introduce herself as well.
Ladies and gentlemen, all our guests joining us tonight, Dr. Diana Sorrentino. I'm a social psychologist, behavioral analyst working with the gender diverse and transgender community, and extremely proud to share that my book, Transgender Families, is available on pre-order.
Woohoo!
You can find it at your local bookstore.
I also have the link. I have the link in the comments. So if y'all check, you should be able to find the links too.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I think we lost Jenny.
She'll be back.
If you go to your local bookstore, because all the bookstores purchase their inventory from Ingram, and my book is distributed through Ingram, it'll be available at every single bookstore, literally in the world.
Awesome. Well, Jenny is actually, I'll go ahead and tell everybody, Jenny is having some storms in her area, and last night they actually had some tornadoes, and so they're kind of having a little bit of a glitchy internet, and if you heard some of that feedback in her sound, that is the sound of it. It's like she's got a jagged, if you will, internet, and so she had already warned us they have storms again in the area. So yeah, I was explaining the situation.
Doing my best.
That's all you can do. So, Dr. Diana, yes, your book came out or is on pre-order. And we had, like I said, I had put the information out there for people to get to it. And she was explaining you can find it at every book in or bookstore in the world because it's through Ingram. So they're everywhere and anywhere. So that's exciting. Jeffrey's here. Welcome. Hey, Jeffrey. Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Jeffrey. Well, what's nice about Ingram is they have 7 book production facilities globally. One is right here in Tennessee, actually, because that's where my inventory of books originated from. And my publisher uploads all the material into the Ingram system. Ingram prints, Ingram distributes, and every quarter I receive my royalty.
Nice.
Woohoo! That's always nice to hear.
Because that'll be contingent upon sales, but I don't think that's going to be much of an issue for this title.
No, I don't think so either. And there's too few out there. There isn't enough. We need more out there, information, books, research, and this is obviously a growing little corner of it, but there should definitely be a lot more.
Well, Cooper, good evening. Well, what's unique about Transgender Families is I wrote the book specifically with the focus on parents and families, their needs for knowledge, understanding, counseling, and having their experiences attended to, because no one transitions alone. So the book is 375 pages. It's broken it down into 53 chapters within 6 different subsections. Again, focusing on the parents and families, because there are so many books, as you can see my bookshelves behind me, for the professionals, for the individual. But in my research prior to writing Transgender Families, I did not find anything that was specifically geared for the parents and family. Now, tomorrow, I send off to my publisher the manuscript for book number 2. It's ready to go.
Nice.
The manuscript for their review, because their editors are going to go through it to make sure that it reads well. And that one's entitled Neurodiversity and Physiology of Incongruent Gender Identities and Sexual Orientations. This is heavy into the biology, the neurology, the endocrinology of what makes us unique. Transgender Families came in at 100,400 words. The second book has come in at 158,000 words. and it'll probably be around 530 pages once it's printed. So that
Well,
goes off.
hot dog.
Yeah, that'll be off to the printer tomorrow, the publisher. Now I'm already starting on a third book, which is going to be entitled Adolescent, Gender Affirming Medical and Behavioral Healthcare, focusing exclusively on the adolescent, basically ages 11 through 19, behavioral healthcare, medical healthcare, surgical healthcare, and the like. I'm already into 80,000 words with that manuscript and over 300 single space type pages. I think this one's going to be larger than book number 2. So what would you ladies like to chat about tonight? You have my undivided attention. It's such a privilege for me to be here with TransParents.
The privilege is ours, and I want to get us started off, if you don't mind if I go ahead and take the lead on the first question. Who is the target audience? Who is the target reader of Transgender Families?
You are. Amber is. Okay?
Okay.
Every parent, every family member who has a gender diverse or transgender individual in their family, whether they are fully transitioned into their affirmed gender or they're just cracking the egg, as you might say, this book is for them to understand. Well, give you an idea. Let me just grab my cheat sheet here. As I indicated, Transgender Families is broken down into 6 parts, which encompass the 53 chapters. The first part is acceptance and understanding is protection. And there's 11 chapters just dealing with acceptance and understanding. What does it mean to be a transgender family? What are the stages of emergence? You have this list. Part 2 is understanding gender diversity and gender identity. And there's another 12 chapters there. And then part 3 is the transgender standards of care. So the first 3 parts, I always recommend that whoever is going to purchase the book, regardless of their interests, whether it's prepubescence, adolescence, or adult, read the first 3 parts.
Okay.
Part 4 focuses exclusively on prepubescent children, especially the fact that they're not eligible for any level of medical or surgical intervention. Part 5 is geared specifically for the adolescents, and there's 15 chapters there. Part 6 is strictly for adults, and then we get into the appendices. And in the appendix, what's important is I have listings for finding the right behavioral healthcare professional, references, the citations that I use for reference, my podcasts, definitions and terminology, recommended reading beyond transgender families, websites, specialized gender clinics, and my background. So that's the thumbnail sketch of Transgender Families. So it's a mini encyclopedia for those who are dealing with it, and also for the individuals. And unfortunately, I didn't catch the name, but they brought up the comment. An individual who does not understand that, thank you, what it means to be gender diverse or transgender. This is a great book for them because it underscores, even at a minor level compared to my book number 2, which will probably be out in April or May, dealing with the neurobiology, how it begins in utero.
Right.
Do you touch on that some, though, in this book? Do you touch on that at all?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I also touch on the neuroimaging studies from diffusion-based magnetic resonance tomography, functional magnetic resonance imaging study. Like I forget the name, which spaghetti sauce, but it's like, it's in there. It's in there. It's in there.
Right.
Goodies are in there. Some chapters are very long, some are short, but it's a broad brush sweep of credible information and be able to find additional information through the resource appendix at the back of the book. So
I
really,
like to.
everybody
No,
should
good.
read this book. Everybody should read this book. If they have any questions
Yeah.
about gender diversity, transgender issues, this book is going to answer a lot of questions.
I love that. I'm excited for it. My dad is a voracious reader. He loves informational text, and this is a book I'm going to get pre-ordered for him because even though he has accepted, I don't know, he's accepted in that way that is like almost defeated. I don't know how else to say it, you know, where he's like, okay, fine, like I have a transgender grandchild. But I think real acceptance, you know, in the way that we think of it,
Well, chapter
I
10
don't
in
think
the
we're there
book.
yet.
Okay, chapter 10 in the book is entitled Shifting the Perception Through Education and Understanding.
I love that. My dad always taught me that the solution to the world's problems are love and education, and that they have to occur together. So
I
I
think,
feel this.
Amber, your mother with your transgender son, I reference that conversation in the book on
Right.
how from total rejection, the needle moved a little bit, but it took 2 years to swing to full acceptance.
Right. Right.
And I reference this in the book also. The gentleman who approached me after a seminar I did for human resource professionals to tell me about his child, who happened to be 17, was really an adolescent, not a child. I spent almost an hour and a half with him, answering his questions, addressing his concerns, sharing my history. And I did not move him to complete acceptance and understanding, but I moved him away from confusion and lack of understanding. I moved the needle.
Right.
And that's it. You want to move the needle a little bit because when you
Right.
have somebody who's totally rejecting, you're not going to go from A to Z. It's going to take time to swing. And that's why, Amber, I didn't mention any names, but I used the example of your mom with your son
Right.
and how it took time. And importantly, having a conversation with another person who had a gender diverse or transgender family member.
Right.
Now, Thursday, I had a meeting with one of my hospital clients with their DEI committee because they want me now to come in and set up a program to train their entire bedside staff on gender diversity, transgender, proper use of pronouns, and so forth, help expand their DEI program, and be on call if they have an issue with a parent or family with a member who is hospitalized, that is one of their adolescents and the like. They're really moving forward quickly. They even hired a young lady for health equity within the hospital.
Excellent. Now, where is that at? Well, you don't have to tell me what hospital if you don't want to, but what area is that in?
Right here in the Lehigh Valley of Pennsylvania.
Nice. Nice.
Okay. But they're
Nice.
also affiliated with several of the hospitals in Philadelphia.
So it would just
That's really
spread.
great. I
Now,
love to know that.
You've got to start somewhere, and I think having somebody of your experience be able to like bring that into the medical floor, because it's not been educated, like that's not been taught in their programs down to the staff that are now running the floor. It just isn't. But it could be. I'm not going to say that it isn't now. It wasn't the last time I was in school, 2017. Up to 2017, it was not in nursing programs out of the two that I had been part of here in North Carolina. And so I know if it wasn't in the nursing program, and I could tell on the floor it had not been in the PAs and the doctors, they hadn't gone through it. X-ray techs, like Jenny's talked about before, like it wasn't in the schooling. And if it's not in the education, that is the reason why there's this varied response, because all they have to go on is their own, I hate to say it, personal bias.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting
if they have
about
no experience.
What's interesting about this particular hospital client is I've been working with them for 10 years. But from the other side of my life, where I do corporate investigations, workplace investigations, risk threat assessment evaluations the corporate work. And
Right.
no one knew officially, some may have surmised, that I was an affirmed woman. And then about a month ago, I was having a conversation with the director of human resources, and I told her about the book. And then she finally asked me, I know you're a psychologist, but what prompted you to write this book? And I said, you haven't put two and two together yet? She says, two and two for what? And I told her at that point that I was an affirmed woman. She almost fell out of her chair. She says, oh my God, our DEI committee wants to talk to you. Because she called me 2 days later. Now, she didn't tell them who I was, but everybody in the committee knows who I am from my other work. And she just told them that we have a woman coming in who's an affirmed woman, blah, 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 who's going to share her life story and work with us to roll this out. Well, you should have seen the looks on the faces of the folks. There were 40 of them there when I walked through the door. It was a great meeting. And this new woman that they hired for health equity, we hit it off like two peas in a pod. And she's so eager to have me part of her work.
Awesome. And that, I mean, that was a huge gap that I noticed. Like that was a huge gap that I was noticing in the education part of the programs, but also when you went to the hospital floor and private provider practices. I did tell Jenny, like I had an experience, my gastroenterologist, when I met him 3 weeks ago, I had a gender fluid nurse and beautiful, beautiful gender fluid nurse. And we got us talking, and she actually had graduated from East Carolina as I had. And I didn't have a chance. Like, I'm so excited to go back to his office, and I'm hoping she's working that day so that I can talk to her because I know how people were biased and not able to go into the program when I was there. I know of at least 3 different people that were turned away because of either being gender fluid or trans. And I wanted to talk to her about, like, so are they teaching, like, I wanted to know, are they teaching this in class? Like, how was your experience? Like, I know that the dean and the assistant dean are both gone now, and I just wonder if that's part of this shift. And so I wanted to get her experiences from school but to know that she went there and that she's accepted and treated very respectfully on the floor and highly looked up to. And honestly, like her reviews, like the office is reviewed. I went out and gave her a glorious review. But just having that experience was just phenomenal because it just tells me that we are getting to a place where we are being more accepting. And that is a shift because I can tell you 10 years ago, it was complete rejection. And even from people in local areas going into hospitals, their experiences are still very varied on how they're treated.
Yeah.
Well, as I've shared with you with so many conversations, as you know, I do a number of speaking engagements on a regular basis, church groups. In July, I did a senior citizens group of 90 retirees in a senior living center. When they receive credible information, factual information from a reliable source, it opens eyes, it opens minds. And getting back to the DEI meeting this past Thursday, of the 40 people there were 7 that had gender diverse individuals in their family. But getting back to what you were saying about medical training, as we've had conversations relevant to the 2011 survey that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, where the medical schools are not doing any training. They've improved a little bit. Now, there are several nursing schools in my immediate area, which means a 50-mile radius. And I've been to programs where I've met the directors and they go, oh my God, we really need what you can bring to us. But then I hear crickets because it hasn't become that big of a priority yet. So I'm hoping that with this one hospital client, it's going to be breaking the ice because then they're going to be able to share with others, hey, look what we're doing. Look what we've built. Look at the resources we've brought in from the outside. But again, the book is going to help. Now, I'm not going to mention a hospital, but there's within the Eastern PA area, there's a children's hospital. And I know the CEO, the president of the hospital. We follow each other on LinkedIn because I had a couple of samples of the book that the publisher sent me before I gave the green light to release it so I could double check it. I sent her a copy. I mailed her a complimentary copy of the book. Let's see what happens. It's a
Right?
children's hospital. Who knows what they're dealing with in there?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and they don't have they don't have a basis. Like they're again, you're talking about something that's not being taught, so they don't know. Like some of the first people that came to my rooms in Mama Bear that I started last year, early last year, were psychologists, were mental health counselors who had no social workers who had no experience themselves and knew they hadn't gotten training for it and had clients that they were working
Right.
with. And it was like, where do I get this knowledge
Transgender
from?
101 is right here for them. This is the
Right?
starting point. This is book one for those individuals. I have close to 500 psychologists, counselors, school counselors on my direct mail mailing list. And once I have the formal press release from the publisher, I'm doing a mass mailing. They need this book as their kindergarten book. Then book two is going to
Right.
be their high school book, and book three can be their college book.
There you go.
I
There
love
you
that.
go. It's necessary. I mean, it's again, that was the gap that I saw that was like we aren't teaching this, which is why we're getting such the varied responses on the floors, why the community doesn't feel supported when they go in for general care or even like if it's inpatient care, whether it be emergency, whether it be like just regular, I got to have my appendix taken out. There was such a a spectrum of responses that people would get. And I don't ever feel when I go, like any of the procedures I go into, I'm not worried about my safety. I'm really never questioning my safety with medical professionals. But I know that is a completely different optic for my son and for anybody in the LGBT community because they don't know who's going to misjudge them. And that again could be off misinformation because they honestly they weren't educated on it.
Well,
So
first
yeah,
of all, they're
anybody
not
who's
educated.
coming out now might be getting it. Maybe, hopefully we're getting there. But again, like you've been an affirmed woman for over 30 some years. And I went to school in the last decade
Yeah.
and it's still not being taught about. Like not even for adults, not even how to affirm adults. Like I could see them kind of being hesitant on the pediatrics. Like I get that. But the adults, we know they've been affirmed adults for decades. So why aren't we ever talking about their care? You want to talk about health care, you got to talk about care for everybody, for every group.
Well, we've hit on it so repeatedly. Lack of knowledge, lack of understanding, lack of exposure. Getting back to the meeting on Thursday, when I shared with them that my evolution took place in 1990, 34 years ago, I mean, they were left speechless. The CEO of the hospital joined us in the meeting. Now, he knew who I was, not as an affirmed woman from the work I've done for the hospital. So this was his first, and he had some great questions for me. He goes, "What was it like back then?" I said, "Different. How did you find care?" So I, went through my history with him, and it was just because I told him they can ask any question but one. Everything was open except one question, and they knew what that question was. Don't ask me about my dead name, which
Yeah.
I never referred to as my dead name. It was a name that just never fit in the first place, and it had to evolve with me.
Yeah.
So, what other questions do you have about the book?
I want to know which chapter, and if this even applies, was your favorite to write and why? Or maybe which section, if chapter doesn't really work.
Okay, let's start with part one, because I consider that to be the most significant as far as importance is concerned for the individual who picks up the book to read it. Part 1 is acceptance and understanding is protection. And there are 11 chapters. The first one is transgender family. What does it mean to be a transgender family? Second chapter, transgender family, your stages of emergence. Transgender identity and the family context is number 4. 3. Then a chapter dedicated exclusively to acceptance as protection for the transgender individual. Minority stress, importance of resilience in family acceptance. Deadly effects of stigma. Suicide, suicidal ideation, non-suicidal self-injury. Actions and messages that communicate rejection. Action and messages that communicate acceptance.
Yeah.
Shifts in perception through education and understanding, and then supporting parents, siblings, and families. Those are the 11 chapters in part 1. I consider those to be the most significant for the first person to read this book.
Okay. That makes sense. Because that's when you get anyone is at the beginning, to keep them motivated to
and then we
read
move
forward.
into part 2, which is understanding gender diversity and gender identity. Exploring gender diversity throughout history. It's a chapter by itself, going back with references thousands of years worth of gender diversity. Gender identity versus sex assignment at birth. Gender dysphoria, cause and effect. The gender spectrum, understanding variations in identity. Gender incongruence, ages of onset. History of transgender medicalization. Results of the magnetic resonance tomography, results of magnetic resonance imaging, neurobiology of gender identity, and development, prepubescent childhood into adolescent. That's part 2.
Okay.
And then part 3 is the standards of care. Because parts 1, 2, and 3 will apply to anyone, whether they're prepubescent, adolescent, or adult. Part 4, prepubescence. And it's it's only 4 chapters. The emergence of the prepubescent child, behavioral assessment of the prepubescent child, managing social and gender affirmation. Because there are times where a prepubescent child will be eligible for a social affirmation, which is name change and presentation, but no hormones, no surgery. And I include medical intervention standards for prepubescent child, which basically says there are no interventions. Then adolescents and adult. And in the adult section is a whole area talking about transitioning while employed. And in the adolescents, dealing with schools. There's a whole section on that.
Well, I mean, like you said, it's an encyclopedia of everything you would need to know, no matter where you and your family fit on that spectrum, right?
I could write a book just on each part. But with the first book, it was a broader spectrum, not to get lost down the rabbit hole, but to provide enough information to spur knowledge. And then, of course, in the appendix, you have a couple dozen books, links to websites, information on specific gender affirming clinics around the country. It's a resource book. Now, for those who want to really get into the neurobiology and physiology, they're going to love book 2. It's heavier reading, but also includes many more definitions. I mean, it's probably got 15 pages of definitions alone. Because when I use a particular term, medical, scientific, endocrinology, I'm familiar with it, but you're not going to be familiar with it. So you just go to the appendix, They're all alphabetical. And then if you want even more information, you can go search on the internet.
That's my jam. I love the technical stuff. Cooper, I want to acknowledge that I see your comment. Sound quality is a constant issue for me. I don't know what to do. I have bought microphones. I'm wearing an earbud. It never fails. I just don't know what to do at this point, except if you want to help me crowdfund a decent laptop and good microphone equipment. I mean, I'm not saying, you're being critical. I'm saying I hear you, I understand, and who knows if it will ever resolve. So just enjoy my voice.
This is something different. I do think this is the lag from the internet. Like it's like every 3 or 4 seconds you kind of hear like this little intermittent chirp that kind of like the static cuts in.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. It's your internet. Because I messaged him and was like, she had a tornado in the area last night. Like her internet's
We're having real spotty internet issues here.
Well, you can always invest in studio quality equipment too.
I could had I any money at all to my name. There goes more thunder. No, I actually love I love the technical stuff. I started following and watching Dr. Sapolsky, I think is his name. He's a neuroendocrinologist. He has some good content on YouTube, and he's just, all I've seen is very brief breakdown of the neurobiology that affects, being transgender or even, sexuality. And it's so interesting to me. And I love that there's going to be a book like that for me. It's difficult, and I have to get a dictionary usually, but I love
the book will have a dictionary for you.
Love it. Love it.
Now, the book that's off to the printer tomorrow, the publisher, only has 32 chapters versus 53. Now, book 3, well, that's a different story. That's going to have even more chapters. But this one is broken down: biology, chromosomes, hormones, brain structures, estrogen receptor pathways, the influence of estrogen on the developing brain, androgen's role in developing masculine characteristics. The masculinization of the brain requires synthesized estrogen. There's a whole chapter just on that. Testosterone does not directly masculinize the brain. Brain differentiation on sex hormones. Orientation, epigenetics, hormones in the brain. Because these neuroimaging studies have proven that trans women like myself have brain structures that are similar to cisgender women. With the also adding the caveat that when we're on cross-sex hormones, it will develop the brain even further along the similarity to your cisgender brains. And the same for the trans male. Androgen insensitivity syndrome, complete androgen insensitivity, congenital adrenal hyperplasia, Malarianogenesis, variant genes. Let's see. And then I start to close out the book with a chapter on social psychology and gender identity, social psychology and sexual orientation, because this book covers sexual orientation also, social psychology, an introduction and historical overview, an introduction to endocrinology. These are all independent chapters. And then my closing commentary. 158,700 words.
You bring something to the topic that I just think, I love that we want to push, folks like Amber, myself, even though Amber has much more of an extensive medical background, I'm out here just pushing for, you don't have to understand it. Just know that this is a human being in your life. And if you love them and you want them to be well and happy, walk through this with them. But I love what you bring to this topic with more in-depth understanding, because it gives, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it gives a way to shoot down a lot of the arguments that we see from certain people or certain viewpoints, that this is just some kind of social trend, or it's some kind of, it's mentally in your head,
Well, keep in mind, Jenny, that when someone does not understand an issue, the easiest way for them to deal with it is to just summarily dismiss it or come up with some ludicrous explanation
right,
that has no merit.
right.
Now, I have done so many presentations for adult groups at churches, and inevitably, someone in the group will pick up their Bible and say, and the Bible says this. And I went, and
Oh,
I'll tell them, okay, I'm a Lutheran. I'm an active member of the Lutheran Church of the Holy Spirit. I'm on their technology team, blah, blah, blah. I said, but the Bible has value, but you have to remember it's a history book. It's been written and rewritten and rewritten. And it's written to control, dominate, and influence people in a positive way, but also in a negative way. But then I hit them with my favorite punchline, which is a question. What was the medical technology that existed when these Bibles, the Torah, or the Quran were written? It was
right,
non-existent.
right.
I said most of the most important information was developed over the last 15, 20 years because of the advances in technology. And it has been proven that there is the biological. We've covered this previously. In fetal development, the earliest stages of an embryo, that embryo has every component of both genders. It has the Mullerian ducts, which create part of the sexual reproduction organs of an XX female. It has the Wolffian ducts, which develop the male genitals, contribute to the development. They have the breasts, the gonads will become either ovaries or testes, depending upon chromosomes and hormones. So you have this ball of clay that can go either direction, provided that the hormones, the genetics, and the chromosomes are in balance. Taking that a little further, external genitalia will be visible in an ultrasound within the first 2 months of fetal development. Male, female. The brain is still immature and developing at that point. If it's an X46XY fetus, male, the brain will become masculinized in the latter part of the third trimester. Testosterone will be synthesized into a synthetic estrogen through the actions of the aromatase enzyme, processed through the estrogen receptor pathways to masculinize the brain. If that synthesis does not take place, the brain will not become masculinized and remains in the default female state. All mammalian brains are female by default. So they're out of the research, the medical school down in Georgia, Dr. Thiessen identified 21 variants in 19 genes which adversely impact the masculinization of the brain of XY fetuses, which is
How
why you
many?
can have 21 variants in 19 genes. Now, they use the term today variants versus mutations. Mutations
Sure.
are going away. It's a variant.
Sure.
Now, what's also fascinating is the 46XX female, who has the female by default brain. There is a specific process that blocks the masculinization of the brain in the latter part of the third trimester. There's a DNA element that will block because the testosterone's there, the aromatase enzyme is there, and it will synthesize the estrogen that is necessary for masculinization. So if it's not blocked, you can have a female 46XX with a male brain. This has been proven in repeated studies.
That's incredible.
I touch on this in Transgender Families. In the second book, Neurobiology and Physiology, we go real deep into this, big time.
Love.
So
If that
when I get these Bible thumpers, and I do not say it totally disparagingly because I am a Lutheran, and I explain this, they sit there and go, "Oh, I mean, one of the programs I did, and I've shared this with you already. I'm 5 minutes into my program, and this little old lady, there's 40 people there, white hair out to here. 5 minutes into our program, she slams her fist on the table and says, if it is a penis, it's a fucking boy, period.
Okay.
And I finished my train of thought. I walked over to her and I said, not always. So I modified my presentation to move things up a little bit. And when I was all done, she just sat there and went, wow, I had no idea. She happens to be a member of my church. 3 weeks later, she comes up to tell me how much she learned and tell me about her lesbian daughter who lives in Texas.
Ta-da!
And this has been my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, education is, it's life-changing. It can change a lot of things.
One of the individuals in the DEI meeting is from the facilities management department of the hospital. And he's a big burly guy with a beard. And he asked me, he goes, how do you instill this knowledge in knuckle draggers? I said, well, that can be quite the challenge. We're losing Amber. I don't know if you heard me talking about the knuckle draggers. The question.
No, I mean, I have a few similar, like there's some people that I refer to as surface dwellers because they like to talk about things, but they don't go in and do it. So that just reminded me. But knuckle draggers, that's, it's been a minute since I've heard that one. So that was great.
So what I shared
Jeffrey said, wow.
My response to him was, if they're willing to listen with an open mind and process the factual information, I don't expect an immediate shift from A to Z, but to move the needle. I said, but if they're so deep into their perceived ideology or whatever ultra wing group they're a part of, it's not going to make a difference.
I agree. And I think also sometimes, in my experience, it's not even like being that deep into something perceived. It's just a really resistance to changing their mind. But there are a lot of people who have a hard time with going, oh, shoot, I might have been wrong.
Well, let's put a few things in perspective here. Over the past several years, between the politicians and the media disparaging gender diversity and being transgender, it's been very quiet. Like people ask me, what was it like in 1990? It was very quiet. My evolution took place. I got on with my life as a woman. No issues.
Right.
And I had never had any issues. Excuse me. But as far as understanding is concerned, let's go back to earlier periods with understanding and working with autism, Asperger's, Down syndrome, and the list goes on.
We don't know until we know.
The beliefs and attitudes for those individuals were very similar to what we're seeing today. But it took years of knowledge, understanding, and developing appropriate interventions, medically and behaviorally, to assist these people. We have a nurse who's part of the official staff at my church, and in one of the bulletins, he put autism spectrum disorder. And I said to him, drop the disorder. It's a spectrum. It's not a disorder. I said, there are variations. Some of these individuals are quite brilliant. but they're on a different wavelength than we are. And we have to adapt to them rather than forcing them to adapt to us. I was reading an article of an autistic individual, higher function, was taken on a helicopter ride around the island of Manhattan, after which he sat down and from memory drew the entire cityscape from memory. Okay? We're not just beginning to even come close to understanding the power of the neurodivergency of these individuals.
Right.
And where does that begin? In utero. All these little anomalies begin in utero. And a question I'm routinely asked by parents, specifically the moms, is, what did I do wrong? Nothing.
Right.
I mean, granted, there are external environmental factors that a fetus in utero can be exposed to through the parent. Smoking, alcohol, drug use, certain external environmental conditions gets into the lungs, gets into the bloodstream, and it's shared with the fetus. Now, one of the things I have in book 2, it's not in this book, book 1, is the fraternal birth order effect for homosexuality, primarily with gay men. Typically, if a mother has 3 or more boys, the probability of the 3rd or 4th son being gay goes up exponentially, because in utero, the fetus's blood through the placenta is shared with the mother. But it's a foreign body, so the mother's antibodies will fight it. And those antibodies end up in the bloodstream of the fetus. The more the mother's exposed, the higher the level of antibodies, and they impact the later born sons. And it's been proven that it can influence sexual orientation.
Wow.
I have that covered in detail in book 2.
Oh, the Catholics and the Mormons are going to be scared.
Yeah, Mom, the more sons you have, the greater the chance you're going to have one that's gay.
So calm down if you don't want a gay child. Maybe calm down. Maybe adopt a dog.
Right. What else would you like to know? I'm here to answer your questions before we run out of time.
I would like to know. Amber, I keep asking all the questions. Do you have questions?
No, like I've been in overload, so I'm letting y'all just have fun with it.
I'm just so curious. I'm a curious person.
Go for it.
Know, when we talk about that, you spoke earlier of this, the kind of genderization, making up words at this point, of the brain happening kind of in that 3rd trimester. So we know now that this is happening in utero. The masculization or feminization of the brain, I believe is how you put it. So then we have these kids, and like in my kid's case, I remember being on your podcast and you asked me, well, what was he like at this age? And what was he like here? And I looked back and there was nothing glaring, but things did make more sense. I saw more of what I would consider maybe masculine behaviors, but nothing as overt as you would see with a cisgender boy. Do you think that that's because I socialized him as a girl at first, and so that's maybe why I didn't see that? Or do you think that it was maybe like the onset of puberty? Like, where is that happening? Because there are a lot of parents that I talk to who will say, I never saw it coming. And I wonder...
That's more common. That's the rule, not the exception.
Really? Okay.
All right. Use myself as an example as an affirmed woman. All through my prepubescent childhood, I felt different. Okay?
Yeah.
I spent more time with the girls than I did with the boys in the neighborhood. The girls welcomed me, the boys, I was a foreign object to them. I didn't understand what I was feeling or experiencing. My mother knew I was different, but she could not put the
Right.
connections together.
Right.
And it wasn't until I hit puberty. But let's go back to like your son and even yours, Amber. How do you explain? How do you share a conversation? How do you begin asking questions about a feeling or an experience that you do not understand yourself? You just feel different. Now, there
Yeah.
are prepubescent children between the ages of 3 and 5 who will definitively say, consistently, insistently, persistently,
Yes.
I'm not a boy, I'm a girl. I'm not a girl, I'm a boy. Well, they're on the fast track to being transgender. And those are the ones who are eligible for social transitioning while in prepubescence, pending adolescence. Okay? Sorry, my brain just took a left turn, but it'll come back. Probably because Amazon is delivering a package to my porch. I have monitors, so
I'm the
excuse my
same way. I'm the
distraction.
same way. Very
I think
understandable.
I think you were about to go into why Jenny and our sons probably came out later and not early, because we
Yeah,
weren't
well,
we weren't kids that came out at 3 and 5 definitively and said,
Right.
this is me.
they they did not understand. I did not understand. And even when
Yeah.
I had significant dysphoria, watching the girls in my class in grade 6 begin to mature and wondering I'm not, you know, what's wrong with me? And like getting back to the gentleman I spoke to after the conference last year, he goes, my child couldn't get him to use the pronouns, but hopefully that has changed. He goes, my child is not explaining to me, he's not talking to me what's going on. I said, your child is still figuring things out themselves. And I kept using the term child, even though it was inappropriate, because I wanted to show respect for him. I said, when your child has put enough of the pieces together, they will share it. And Amber, your son, I think, is the poster child for that because
Right.
many times, if they're assigned female at birth, um, I'm gay, I'm asexual, and I'm a man, or assigned male at birth, I'm gay, I'm asexual, I'm bisexual, no, I'm
Yeah.
transgender. It takes a
Yeah.
while. This is where, if there is an expression of gender incongruence during prepubescence, allow the exploration. Be supportive. Don't push them one way or the other, because all you're going to do is add distress and dysphoria into their lives. Because in most cases, that prepubescent child showing gender fluid behavior, gender incongruence, cross gender role play, and so forth, at puberty that goes away. And usually by ages 7, 8, and 9, it starts to dissipate. And in puberty, it's ancient history. As I like to share, and this is covered in book 2, there's 3 categories. You have the prepubescent child that shows gender fluid, gender incongruent, cross gender role play, assume a different gender with certain friends in role play, blah, blah, blah. Well, at puberty, one example that goes away. Example 2, at puberty, they could be on the path to being transgender. Third, they're on the path to being lesbian or gay. So it's A, B, or C. The majority of the time, it's A. Puberty goes away. More often than not, they're either gay or lesbian, and then in the C category is transgender.
I think I guess the only thing that really popped up for me, and I'm sure I could go digging in the book and find it, but that I thought might be of interest because Jenny and I have discussed this before because of the medical part. Are they still teaching? Do you know? Because I don't know if this is a universal, like for med schools in the US, if that's determined at like a federal level or if that's like by state, like where we put the books, the education, right, in college programs. But are they still teaching? Because we knew a pediatrician that had talked to us and pretty much said that intersex children, when they were born, that pretty much the parents were advised to go ahead and honestly, that then in the early 90s, they were already saying that they should all be created female and turned into vaginas. What, I guess, do you know what is the I guess education now on intersex infants when they're born?
Well, a significant shift away from that automatic default surgery to turn them into
Excellent.
female, because there's been so much blowback with psychological problems when they reach puberty or early adulthood.
Sure.
Because if it's a 46XY male who had their brain was masculinized, but due to complete androgen insensitivity syndrome, which is the precursor to anomalous genitalia. Okay, so you create a vagina and you put the child on hormones, but the brain is not going to coincide with what you're trying to do. And the
Right.
classic example of this is the case of David Reamer. We've covered this. 1966, twin boys were born, Winnipeg, Canada. There's a book out there called As Nature Made Him. A botched circumcision destroyed the penis of one of the boys, twin boys. Took him to Johns Hopkins. Sexologist John Money, Ph.D., and the folks there convinced the parent nurturing is more powerful than hormones or chromosomes, so we can raise this child as a girl. It failed miserably. They did surgery to make it look like a vagina by age 2, put him on female hormones. The parents attempted to raise him. I keep using the term him because it was not a girl. And there were serious behavioral issues. And it wasn't until his early adolescence when he was finally told what happened and he went back to his natal sex of male.
I can't
That's why
imagine.
that's a book I highly recommend, As Nature Made Him, by John Calapinto. It's a true story of David Reamer. Now, what's interesting is John Mooney, the sexologist, and the folks from Johns Hopkins cooked the books to make it look like this was working. But there were those in the field that didn't believe it, and finally in the 70s came up with the credible information to discredit everything that they had previously published. And it really put a black eye on their gender clinic, which eventually closed. I think they've reopened it. But
Probably. I would
once,
assume so, and hopefully with better
yeah, well, it gets back
better.
to once the brain is masculinized or remains in the feminine state, it's locked in for life. If it's congruent with the genitals, you have a happy camper. If it's incongruent with the genitals, you're going to have an individual with psychological problems if they're not allowed to express who they are.
Yeah.
I mean, I went through years of turmoil going into hyper masculine activities to fight and suppress my experience because I didn't have any knowledge, I didn't have any information. We're talking 60s, 70s, early 80s here. It wasn't until I met an endocrinologist who worked with the community specifically that opened the doors for information and allowed me to connect the dots and put the pieces of my puzzle together. And it was also the point when I started the deep dive into research and study. I've been working on this for 40 years, even though my affirmation is only 34 years, because I was on gender cross-sex hormones well in advance of my formal affirmation. And as I've shared with many of my colleagues, when I started writing all three of these books, aside from the research material that I have, the amount of information that just kept flowing out of my head that was sort of like buried there in memory. It was like I was amazed at how much I was recalling. Transgender Families, I started writing the manuscript the 30th of May this year. August 12th, the finished manuscript was off to the publisher.
Wow.
Immediately after releasing the manuscript for book one, I started working on the manuscript for book two. Now we're talking, say, the middle of August. Well, tomorrow, the manuscript for book two is off to the publisher. 530 pages, single space type, 158,000 words.
That
I
is
mean, it just
impressive.
flows.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, that's a little my brain. I don't know, I've been under too much anesthesia this year to even think about it. It doesn't even work for me. Like, oh,
I can't even
Yeah.
imagine.
But you know,
right?
Amber, you have so much knowledge and experience that should be boiled down into your own book.
Yeah, and I think at some point I will. And I went back and looked at my podcast and I did go in and like pull like 30 episodes and do the transcripts, and I got done with my transcripts and I had 897 pages just in transcript, and I just thought this is a lot. And when I told Jenny, I was like, Jenny, do you know sometimes I use like 50 to 100 resources an episode, and I don't want to have to go back and because I don't necessarily keep those. Like I'll have them up for the
Yeah.
episode and I'll put up like the top 20. Sometimes if we have a heavy data episode, I'll put up like the top 20, 25 resources. But I don't put 100 and 150 out there because I don't want to
Yeah.
overwhelm people. But I was just kind of like, so now I've got to go in and like dictate what, right? I got to go back and pull out like what is just
This
more
is one
the
of
thought.
five. All right, this is one of 5 binders of research material for book 2.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, no.
Wow. Yes, Amber. Don't let that
The,
scare you.
no, it's not that. It's the ADD in me, and really, I think probably when I do write, whatever I write, it will come more on a personal level than from that academic standpoint, right? Like I think that's where I originally, in a way, started at, and now I kind of
Well,
feel like where I've shifted myself, just as a
one of
person,
the
as a
other
parent,
things I
is
want
where I
to
would
add,
move it.
one of the things I want to add about transgender families, throughout the entire book, I include pieces of my own life and my own transition.
Right.
Professional note, personal note. It's all in here.
And I think that's the reason why when you said you were writing that I thought it was a beautiful opportunity, not for just programs for the education purpose, but also here is someone that not only has the knowledge and the research behind them, but they've also lived this life and they've been on this journey for decades. And I'm kind of like Jenny. It's harder to refute you. It's harder to push back against you and say, no, that can't be real. Well, hello, I'm right here. I think I am.
Right.
It's much
Right.
harder for somebody to push back against you when you tell them this information than I think like a parent, like a
Right.
cis psychologist who's speaking about it.
Yeah.
Like it's much easier for people to push back on someone who doesn't have that lived perspective.
Right.
So I think adding both in there, and also like your transition in the professional world, like even adding that element to it is again another layer that people, like you said, you just walked into this meeting last week and they were not expecting to see a colleague that they had already been working with and already knew very well. So, and that again, that one, you walking in that room shifted 40 people.
Yeah.
One of the psychologists from the hospital that was in the DEI meeting paid me the nicest compliment. She said, "You have such a powerful pedigree." because
It
of the
is.
history and
Hmm.
my knowledge and my research.
I do, and that's kind of what I meant. Like, I mean, between the education element of it and the fact that, you know, if you've been involved with the research, you talk about you're a deep, enriched researcher yourself, and then you add that element of your lived experience, your professional experience. I think that does say something. It's kind of, Jenny and I talked about it. I think it's for parents who are new to the experience, for families who are new to the experience, who are just finding out about their child that is possibly questioning or has come out to them. I think someone like you gives them perspective of, okay, this isn't a trend. Like you automatically, your information automatically shuts down a lot of those, oh, this is just happening to teenagers. I know this just started. They automatically can't say that to you because you automatically are laying out 30 years of nope in front of it. So
Plus,
it
many of
makes them
them,
Over
have
30
to sit
years.
down
Yeah.
and really question, like, why do I feel this way? Where did this come from? And I think that that's one of the things that you have to make parents
well,
do
in
is
my
get
clinical
curious.
practice, because in my clinical practice, I work exclusively with adults. I have colleagues that work with the adolescents. I'll work with the parents of the adolescents. Well, in my clinical practice, the majority of the individuals I'm working with are ages 35 to 60 who are going through their gender affirmations later in life.
Well, I just think there's something about our generations that as we've gotten older, because I will say that out of the people, the range of ages that I know that are gender diverse, the people that are the older ones, 50 and 60, the majority of them have only been out 5 to 6 years. If I go to my age group, the mid 30s to mid 40s, which I'm a little outside of that group. But if I go to that age group, they're typically around early 30s to mid 30s before they came out and they're beginning their journey. When I go back up to my kids' age, it's like more early 20s is when they're coming out. And then you back up even further and you got kids Jenny's age coming out a little bit. So I think there's just this understanding out there more, and maybe
Well,
it's the way we're raising our kids that we're allowing a little bit more
well,
of
your
them to share who they are, whereas before we were
parent,
shut down,
well, parents are a little more relaxed
right?
outside of certain households to let their kids be their kids. Also, there's so much more information available. And between
Exactly.
the internet and chat rooms and social media, even though the information many times may not be accurate or credible, it's a starting point. I was
Right.
36 when my affirmation took place. That was 34 years ago. So I'm giving away my age. This past August, I turned 70. I've
You
come a
don't
long
look it.
way. Most people think I'm in my late 50s. If they do not know me
Love.
professionally, they assume that I'm in my late 50s. Some have guessed early 60s. And then they're totally blown away when I tell them I'm 70.
Hold on to it. As long as you can, hold on to it. I also say you're as young as you feel, so honestly, I don't really care. The
Well,
wrinkles are just experience.
I got a lot of
well,
experience going on up here.
yeah.
All right,
Well,
right, right, very much so.
yeah. Jenny, you have another question?
But I just always love learning from you. I can't wait to grab your book. I can't wait to get it for people that I care about. I think it's also great for, families like mine who, okay, they're at that whatever acceptance thing, but it's just, I know they are not seeking out this information intentionally. I know they're not really trying to understand more. They're just at that, like I said, kind of defeated place of, okay, fine. I mean, I love my grandchild, so I'm just going to deal with this. And,
Well,
taking it to a deeper level, hopefully we'll give them some appreciation for.
the global appetite for this information is mind boggling. My podcasts are now has reached a point. I have subscribers in 54 countries.
That's cool.
Every month it grows. Every
That's cool.
single month it grows. 54 countries.
I can believe that. I mean, with the audiences that I've the varied countries that come to Mama Bear for the last year and a half, uh, countries I never expected sometimes. Like it vary. I've never counted how many different ones I have, but I'm always really surprised sometimes at some of the attendance. Like, really? And they keep coming
Yeah.
back. Like some of my regulars, I'm like, oh, okay, more power. Like whatever. Like
Yeah.
it, whoever wants to come, the information's there. Um,
Yep.
and I love that, and I love getting perspectives, honestly, globally on how they view the trans community, how that is impacted in their own communities. Um, I have a few favorites that come into my rooms that share their perspectives in other countries that I just love hearing them talk about it. Honestly, some of them even from the religious standpoint, because of the fact that it's it depending on the culture, depending on the culture is how they I guess you could say interpret
Well,
their
let's
religion, because
let,
they
let's
they have the same religion that we do, but they interpret it in a way that is
Right.
very way more open, way more understanding, and way more loving than we do, because
well,
that's what she'll talk to me about. It's like, I don't understand how the Christians say that they're this against that community when this is what's in the Bible that they're listening to. So
yeah,
it's just a very
yeah.
interesting conversation.
Well, one
Yeah.
of the things that drew me to the Lutheran Church was they have a big sign out front. Everyone is welcome. And in the slideshow before services, you know, we are a reconciling in Christ conversation. We welcome all, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, and their allies. Reconcilingworks.org is sort of like an oversight organization. There are over 1,100 Lutheran churches in the United States right now that are reconciling in Christ. I was invited to be a guest on a podcast several months ago from a woman out of Hawaii, and they've been looking for a church. She never knew of the Reconciling in Christ, so I went to the website, found 5 churches within driving distance of where she lived in Hawaii that were RIC churches. The shift is beginning, but you have to get through the older generations. And I'm enjoying the church that I'm attending. I'm not overly religious, I'm more spiritual, but it's a good place. I had a few extra copies of the sample book, so I gave one to each of the 3 pastors.
Nice.
You know,
Well, I mean, I
and
think it just opens doors to people's what they believe. And Kevin varied. I think I meant to say various. It may come out varied. Various countries have the same issues and always have the support they need. No, I agree. I just meant she has a perspective from a different country on the Christian religion and how they interpret it and how they love their communities, and they express that from the same God and Jesus that are weaponized from many religions here. That was what that comment was about. I love that person when they come in the room, because they just have it's a very beautiful relationship that they have with, honestly, the entire LGBT community, whether it's their children or it's just community members or colleagues or someone in the church. Um, all love is love. And yeah,
well,
it's just
the other thing too is the medical community and the psychological and psychiatric community up until the late 90s were a major contributor to the problem,
right.
because they listed it as a pathology, a mental illness. And I mean, it took until the 70s before they removed homosexuality as a mental disease or disorder. You know, moving gender identity disorder to gender dysphoria was a move in the right direction, but it's still a pathology driven more by the needs of insurance companies to justify coverage
Cody.
because they need
Hmm.
a diagnosis. You know, it's a long, hard fought battle that will just continue. But inchworm, we're making some progress.
Right? Right? I mean, and that's the point is progress. Till we get where everybody gets the treatment, whatever medical treatment they need, that they're able to A, access it, but B, get it from professionals who've had the training. And that's
Exactly.
kind of the point that we're talking about here is that a lot of times they're not even receiving that training in their education. And so when they get to the floor, they have no idea. And that does kind of leave it up to the individual to use their own interpretation. If they've not been taught, if they've not been educated, then they're now creating their own education here on what they think is best.
Well,
And
this is where
that's,
the World Professional Association for Transgender Health plays such an
yes.
important role. And what frustrates me are the number of psychologists or counselors that'll call me on a referral because they have a question or an issue. And I ask them, are you a member of WPATH? Well, what's WPATH? I send them to the website, tell them how to get the standards of care downloaded for free, blah, blah, blah. I was at a networking meeting a few weeks ago, and there was a physician there, young physician. And when I exchanged business cards with him, because I thought he might be a viable networking professional, he goes, "Oh, I work with transgender people. Really? Are you a member of WPATH? What's WPATH? What training have you had? Oh, we had some training in my internship." I looked him square in the eye, and excuse my colorful metaphor. I looked him right in the eye and said, "You don't know what the fuck you're doing."
Nope. Nope.
I said, "Why are you doing that?" Haven't seen him since.
Yeah.
Go figure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It takes
Jenny, you look
education.
like you have another question.
No,
No? All right.
I just think that's fantastic.
I love it. We need more education. We need more
Well,
resources. Like that's the whole thing.
this sheet lists all of the sections, the parts, and the chapters for transgender power. I've sent it to you, so you can
Hmm.
look through it. Do you have questions you
Yeah,
want
I
me to
did. I
find?
looked through it and sent it to Jenny earlier, but like I do just for audience members here. And if you're watching this later on TikTok or you hear about this on Spotify, I will put the link. And you can just for I'm gonna read it out or say it just so that we know. But we're gonna do transgender families you can find at Amazon. And if you like again, just all you have to search is transgender families and Dr. Diana Sorrentino and it will pop up, I promise. The links, so like she said at the beginning of the show, the links kind of keep refreshing. And so like every time I would go to like click the old link that I would have posted, it would have died and like just kind of dead in and I had to go pull another link and replace it. So I was, yeah, yeah. So it might be easier just to type that in if you
Right.
go to check the links that are in the comments and it's not working. Make sure you just go to Amazon and type it in. It'll come up. And she, as you heard her say earlier in the show, you can also go to pretty much any of your bookstores and if they don't have it, request it.
Yeah. All the
That's another way to
bookstores,
get it into your store is to request it if they don't have it available because then they automatically order more copies to that store.
every bookstore purchases their inventory from a company called Ingram. Ingram is the largest producer of books and distributors in the world. They have 7 production facilities globally, one right here in Tennessee, and that's where the bookstores buy their books. So if you tell them Transgender Families, Dr. Sorrentino, if you visit my website, paradoxesofgender.com, and click on the books page, you'll see the ISBN number, which helps them find it even faster.
Right. And I did share that link to Paradoxes of Gender to your website. That's shared in the comments, pinned in the comments too. Well, it's not pinned, but it's in the comments too if anybody is
Yeah.
looking for it or has questions about it. And I think actually I made a post earlier today that had the ISBN in it. So if they wanted to just click on the code, they could like click on, do the URL code and it would take them straight there. Just again, trying to make sure that I had all the codes right because like Dr. Diana kept hitting me up. Here's a new here's a new link. Here's a new link. And I was like, I know every time I go click on it, it's like not working. And I kept having to like replace it. So yeah. So everybody listening out there, definitely just go out to Amazon, Transgender Families, Dr. Diana Sorrentino, and you will find it. And hopefully she will have more upcoming manuscripts linked to that one soon that will be published so you can continue following her very, very, very researched information that she puts out there for people to know, for families, so they understand their family members and really their greater community, because that's what we want here. That's
Well,
what
book
Judy and I
number
strive to
two,
do.
yeah, book number two is going to be, the manuscript is off to the publisher tomorrow. The first step is that their editors will go through it with a fine-tooth comb. I have no problem with that because they look at punctuation, spelling, sentence syntax, and the like. When I received the reviewed copy back from book number one, there were very, very few changes. The Chicago Manual of Style, which they use, is a little different than I'm accustomed to using, but I'm adapting to it. So the point I'm getting at is it's going to take about 6 weeks for their editor to get through it. I mean, we're talking 158,000 words here, and it's not light reading.
No.
Once the editor's done, they will send me a PDF of everything that they've noted, if there was something to note. They are not allowed to change anything. If they have a recommendation, they have to clear it with me. And if I disagree, there's no change. From there, it then will be handed off to the person who does the typesetting, which takes the MS Word document and puts it in book format. And that can take another 4 to 6 weeks. Kevin, I haven't run into any yet. It's,
Yay!
they know that I am the professional, and this is my area of expertise, so I haven't had any issues yet. So it's going to take another 4 to 6 weeks by the time they finish typesetting it. Once they finish typesetting it, they send it to me as a PDF to review and approve. After the typesetting is approved, then it's off to the art department. And what I love about the publisher is they came up with this cover right out of the gate.
Nice.
I loved it. The cover art was phenomenal. Approve that. I get the sample book. I give them the green light, which took place this past week, and off to release. And It's also coming out as an ebook. So it'll be another couple of months before it's out as an ebook. So getting back to book number two, by the time it goes through all of those reviews and processes, we're probably looking at April by the time it's going to be released, maybe May. Which is fine.
Still not bad timing. Still not bad timing. You got to work with this book first.
Well, like I was shared earlier, I started the manuscript for this book the 30th of May this year. It was released for publication on the 31st of October this year. 5 months.
That's fast. That's lightning.
I think that's very impressive.
Right? Like the amount of pages, the amount of research, like all the above. Like,
yeah. But what made the first book so easy to put together that fast was the outlines were in my podcast. Well, literally, most of what I had to do was take the outlines from the podcast and then narrate them out.
Yeah, perfect.
And even with the second book, a lot of it was within the podcast. But then, like the binder I showed you, which I have 5 of them, 3-inch thick binders chock full with peer-reviewed literature that I researched. Number 2 came together. Now I'm working on number 3.
I love it.
That is so awesome. That is so awesome. Well, ladies, we have run well over time, and I don't want to go too much further over because then I won't even be able to get 2 of these squished out on TikTok if we go too much longer. It'll be 3 parts, and that we try to keep it at 2 just because it won't get seen as often. It just won't get picked up. People
Yeah.
watch the first, and then maybe some of the second. It drops off when you do it and more, just because they're so big. I
We
can't
can
wait
wrap
till we
up
can
the
go live
official,
there.
and then we can continue chatting afterwards.
That's
Okay.
awesome. All right, guys. Well, thank y'all for coming, for being here, Transparents. Next week, I'm not exactly sure who our guest is. I have confirmed one for the 17th, and I have to get back with Arrive Therapy about whether or not next week will work for them or if we're going to do the weekend after the 17th with them. But
Fantastic.
so we're looking at other therapists and clinicians that are going to be coming on and talking about their work within the LGBT community, what their services offer. Um, and I've got one that speaks with a lot of schools that goes back and speaks, and helps educate the psychology program that he came from on how to, support transgender children, adolescents, like depending on what the age group is that are coming through their clinics. And he works with PsyPAC, so that he's crossed most of the country for, again, people who may not have access in their area. This was a way that they could get telehealth and still be able to get resources. So again, like Jenny and I said, we always try and offer y'all as many resources as possible so that whatever fits for y'all, what you gravitate to. I'm never going to say that I think one thing is right for this person or that person, because we're all different. We all come from somewhere different. And so what one person finds right for them may not fit you. So again, we offer everything that we can up here. And Dr. Diana, thank you so much for returning and being here again. And we are so excited about A, getting our hands on the book, B, about having you on for the next one, when that one's getting ready to come out, and so on. And the journey continues, right?
Well, Amber, Jenny, just consider me your beck and call girl whenever you need me to come on.
Excellent. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right, guys, we're going to call it a night. Thank you. See y'all next week.
Thank
I
you,
know there was a
Kevin. Thank
time
you,
shift.
Jeffrey.
Yes, there was a time shift, but we still will be 7 o'clock Eastern, however that works out for you. 7 o'clock Eastern. All right, guys. See y'all next week. Bye.
All right, bye.